Hey everyone, in this video of HTML background image series, we are going to explore another exciting feature called background attachment. And this feature defines how attached a background is to the viewport or content. Attachment of background image is directly associated with scrolling. So attachment, based on how you define it, controls whether background would scroll with content, stays fixed in place, or move in a certain way in relation to the viewport, where viewport is the visible area of the web page. As always, this is a live coding video and you are encouraged to follow along. So let's go ahead to Visual Studio Code where I have made another copy of A0 setup folder and renamed it to PG attachment and open in Visual Studio Code. If you're not familiar with what I am saying, please refer to our setup coding environment video and background image playlist. Let's go to CSS file now and add our background image and explore the attachment stuff. Okay, here we are. I'm going to start off by adding our background image. This time I'm going to use the small one. So background attachment is controlled using the CSS property called background attachment. If I type it and hold after colon, we can see the values that we are going to be working with, particularly scroll, fixed, and local. Understanding all three is important to control attachment behavior. So let's start with scroll. Okay, I'm also going to make another change to our CSS, which is height being 200 VH. And this step was really important as it allows the scroll bar to show up because now the body element is twice as high as the viewport. So it is overflowing and the scroll bar is showing up to compensate. So emphasizing gain attachment is all about scrolling. It doesn't mean anything without it. So now let's scroll and see what the behavior is. Okay, pretty much expected, I would say. The background scrolls with the content, which is what we are used to. So no surprises here. Node scroll is the default value. So even if we don't define it explicitly, it is auto applied by default. And behavior is to make background image attached to the content. So if you scroll the content, the background image scrolls along and maintains its position relative to page's content. Now, if you're wondering, there is no content, so what am I talking about? So let me add some content and show you so what I'm saying makes sense even more. So here's hello world at the top. So if you see, if I scroll, the content goes up along with the background as expected. Important bit is it is scrolling with the background. So it will move up or down depending on how I am scrolling. It would be more clear to you once we introduce our next value, which is fixed. And that's where you are going to see the difference. So I'm going to type fixed now for my background attachment property. And before I show you what it does is, let me explain. So it fixes or pins the background image to the viewport or browser window. It is no longer attached to content. So let me add a few more lines. Let me say, hey world, let's keep things. All right. So let's scroll and see. Did you see the difference from scroll? The background is no longer attached to content. So if I move the content moves past the fixed background. We can go all the way down to the bottom using the scroll bar, but the image would hold its position relative to viewport. So you would generally come to know about this effect as static background or parallax, which is a fancy way of saying content scrolls while background image remains fixed in place. It would look more interesting with a large image, so let's change the image to the large one. So let me make this. I'm going to use the PG large image this time. Okay, let me also make background size cover to make it fit the viewport. Here we go. So if you recall, cover value of background size makes the image cover the entire viewport. It resizes to it resizes in response to the viewport size. So now the image is taking the entire viewport but would not move as the content scroll as before, right? One downside of parallax effect is its performance concerns, especially with old browsers or mobile devices, as they tend to redraw the background constantly as the user scrolls. It is not supported widely across browsers either, so absolutely do your research before using it in production. Now, I do understand that this performance talk is totally counterintuitive, as one would expect it to improve performance, not degrade it. But browsers have to keep the background in a separate layer and repaint it behind content as scrolling occurs. So it not only leads to resource consumption like memory and processing power, on smaller devices it can cause jerky or glitchy behavior while scrolling. So always use it with caution and even consider disabling it for mobile devices altogether if it is an option. There are ways to do so in a better way beyond scope of this video. There are specialized JavaScript or CSS libraries available as an option tuned to performance of this effect, which you can look up on your own later on. As for the use cases, parallax effect is great for use cases where you say are describing something and want it to remain in picture as the user scrolls. For example, your tourism website has a page about Leaning Tower of Pisa, and you want the image to be visible throughout the reading session of your users. This can apply to full website or a div. So let's move on to our next background attachment value, which is local. So let's show you when and why it's needed first and expect the unexpected now. So I'm going to make some changes. I'm going to remove this. I'm going to say div background image being. I'm going to use the BG small one. I'm going to reduce the height to just 100 pixels. And I'm going to say overflow to be scroll. This is all going to make sense. I'm going to explain everything in a second. Let me just go ahead with the setup. So for the HTML content, I'm going to make 3 copies of it and enclose all of this in a div. So I'm going to take the end tag and place it at end. Now I'm going to press Shift Alt F to format my HTML. It looks good. Let's see what we did here. So I added a div element inside the body and applied background image to that div instead of the entire body. I kept height of the div really small, like 100 pixels, since it's a block type element and I can set its height explicitly. So I set it to 100 pixels and next I set overflow to scroll. And what that means is if the content of the element or the div element overflows or grow more than the element can accommodate in its given height, then the behavior that should be applied is to make a scroll bar appear. The other options are to clip the contents and few more which are not we are not discussing at the moment. They are not important. So here we are with a div with a scroll bar and background image applied on it. Now remember the default value of background attachment if not specified is scroll. With that in mind, let's scroll and see the result. Well, like I said, expect the unexpected. The background is behaving as if it's fixed. Why? Maybe the default value on child element of body is different, so let's be explicit here. I'm going to force the background attachment to be scroll so that it behaves like it should, but seems it had no effect whatsoever. So what's going on? Before discussing the fix, I would bring it to your attention that this behavior is due to performance and rendering optimizations that Chrome and other browsers apply when background images are applied on child elements. Again, not a topic for this video, but content is sometimes rendered in layers, and background image is considered a separate layer than contents of the element. To optimize rendering, browsers sometimes render this layer relative to containers bounding box or the viewport. So when the element goes into overflow mode, and a scroll bar appears, the background layer sometimes gives an illusion of being fixed relative to contents of the element, even though it behaves like scroll from perspective of viewport or body element. So if I make a scroll bar appear on the body element and show you, and to do that, I'm going to double the height of body compared to viewport. So now we have two scroll bars. This is the body scroll bar. So if I scroll the body element scroll bar, see the element moves along with its background. But if I scroll the scroll bar of element itself, the background behaves as fixed relative to element's contents. Now, unsurprisingly, there is a solution which is the local value of background attachment, which forces background to move with contents inside the element itself. The value is used in scrollable containers like the div we are using in our example. There is good reasoning behind this behavior where browser is trying to minimize rendering the background repeatedly for each scroll event. But as a side effect, this gives the illusion of, or rather the effect of element with a fixed background. So using local on such elements, we can ensure this behavior never happens on the element it's applied to. Let me change it to local. Let's give it another try. And yes, this time it is working as it should. Now I understand you might not be familiar with rendering or repainting or stuff like that until now. We are going to have a separate video about this on our channel. But at this moment, if whatever I said didn't make sense to you, just remember you can use local to fix the behavior that you were seeing earlier. Right, this brings us to the end of the video. If you found it informative, please don't forget to like and share, and consider subscribing to the channel for more interesting videos like this one. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.